Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week, we are doing episode 7, which is chapters 22 through 25 of The Way of Kings. We will be discussing multiple things this week, including a couple new characters and a couple decisions that need to be made, and some drama between Dalinar and Adolin. And Paul, can you give me 2 words to describe these chapters?
Sure can. So my 2 words for this week were political and hardworking.
Political and hardworking, and I do believe hardworking is actually one word, so
Okay.
you can
Hyphenated?
It's at least
Hyphenated.
hyphenated.
Yeah.
At a minimum, it's hyphenated.
All right, Elliot, what is your single words to no run-ons?
My actual single words are, you actually almost stole one of them with your intro there. My words are family drama.
Family
drama.
Family drama. Okay. Let's discuss family drama. All right, Paul, what were your 2 words?
So I said political and hardworking.
Political. What does
And
political mean?
The political was for the conversations that we're going to look at between Dalinar and his mother, and how his mother seems a lot more savvy in the public sphere and a little more political minded, like kind of the proper games in a sense. Um, a lot better at that than Dalinar is. And I said hardworking whenever we're going to look at Kaladin's chapters and how he really puts in a lot of legwork to try and make some money and improve his situation on the bridge crew.
Okay. Elliot, family drama. What are you referring to here?
So I said family drama because there was a lot of interaction between family members in these chapters. We had the Dalinar chapters, like Paul mentioned, where we get, I think it's Elokar's mother, right? Who comes in?
Yes.
Elokar's mother. So it's Dalinar's essentially, what would that be? Sister-in-law, basically.
Correct.
So lots of family interaction there. We had Dalinar and Adolin getting into it with some serious drama there in between family. And then finally in chapter 25, we met Kaladin's mother, which I was super curious to learn about her and if she was still in the picture or who she was. And we got to meet her and interact with her. So lots of family.
Yes, indeed, lots of family. Before we go any further, let's spell check some of these characters and places. So Elokar's mother, or Dalinar's sister-in-law. Elliot, how would you say this name?
So for this one, I went with Navani. It seemed pretty simple to me.
Okay.
Navani.
All right.
Spot on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Paul, how would you like to
Right.
spell Navani?
So a lot of my inspiration now for these spell checks has been the idea of palindromes and these near
Ooh.
palindromes that they always go for. So mine is close to palindrome. I have Navani.
Correct.
Ding, ding, ding,
100% correct for both of you. Good job. Off to a great start.
Very good start.
The second one is a little obscure. It is found in chapter 22. And Elliot, how would you like to say this place's name, if you know where I'm referring to?
So I'm hoping I'm looking at the right one, and my win streak is probably ending here. Is this the one that's 2 words?
Yes.
Essentially.
Two short
Okay.
words. Starts with an S.
Okay. Yep. All right. I'm kind of guessing here. It seems like it might be simple, but then not. So I'm kind of guessing on the not. I'm going for Sela Talis.
Okay. Not 100% correct, but not bad. Paul.
Very close. And I mean, it's basically the flow of the word was the only part that was wrong. I would say Celatales. So
Okay.
you're basically correct.
Yep.
I did not know that this was two words, so I don't know if it disqualifies me from the spelling. I had similar with the near palindrome. I had Seletales.
Oh,
You're almost correct.
so close.
It's Selah is in an A at the end of Selah, and then Tales. So, but they're also two different words. So there's a strike against you.
True. I was close. I was close. I'll chalk that up as a win. So.
All right. We'll keep a tally on your imaginary scoreboard somewhere.
Cool. Right up here.
Okay. And the next one is from chapter 24, and High Prince Dalinar is talking with another High Prince to try to get him to work with him. And Eliot, how would you like to say his name?
Okay, this is one that, again, I feel like is going to be deceptively difficult, even though it looks simple. Too many vowels in this one, but I'm going for Rowian.
Rowian. Okay.
Yeah.
Paul, how do they say this, and how would you like to spell it?
So it's Royan. I
Ah,
believe that's correct. Royan. And I am a little embarrassed because I hear that there are quote unquote so many syllables, or so many. You said something like that because I did
so many
very
vowels.
Oh, vowel. Yes, I did very
Yep.
simple. I have Roy. Is that an A-N? Very simple.
I mean, that sounds like Rowian, but
Royan.
You're headed in the right direction.
yeah, it's Roion. Rowian.
Roion.
Yep.
Rowion.
Yep. And you even read this name last week on the map that I sent you of all the High Princes.
Oh, that's true.
So you don't really have a pass for that one.
Well, at least you know I wasn't cheating.
True.
Kind of.
Hey, we both got Navani, so
We did both get
points for us.
Navani.
That's better than we usually do.
That's a much cooler name than Royan.
You making fun of Royon's name?
Royan? Like, come on, Royan? Like, give me a break.
All right.
Okay.
Eliot, you want to start us talking about chapter 22 and the feast that Dalinar goes to?
Sure. So, chapter 22 was kind of another one of those where there wasn't a lot of action. It was more politics and culture and things like that. And while those chapters aren't quite as exciting as some of the Kaladin chapters or the more exciting Dalinar chapters, like when they're fighting a chasm fiend, I still do appreciate the culture chapters because I definitely get to learn some stuff about this world. And this was definitely one of those chapters. And I think the first thing I picked up on as we went to the King's Feast was everything was segregated. You had women sitting at specific tables and you had men sitting at specific other tables. And then there was even a mention, it was kind of an offhand mention where Dalinar references that they eat different food. And he mentioned that like in his childhood he'd tried women's food once or something like that. That struck me as kind of odd. Is this just an Alethi custom, or is this maybe Vorin religion driven? What's going on with this?
So Brandon Sanderson's been asked this in interviews, and like older interviews, like only when The Way of Kings was out, on what the heck is happening here. And he says that quirky customs in human history just fascinate him. So that's why the Alethi women cover their safe hands with a sleeve for no reason. That's just their custom, and they believe that to be modest, so that's what they do. And the women's food is traditionally sweet, and the men's food is traditionally spicy. So they don't eat next to each other, and there's some very fine lines that Navani crosses in this chapter of she can't approach Dalinar until he's done eating because they're not allowed to eat together, but they can sit and converse together. So as like the second that he's done eating, she comes up and approaches him, and he's like, "Oh shoot, I finished my meal," and so, but she's
Yep.
also not allowed to sit at the king's table, and so she's sitting like right next to the king's table. So there's a lot of very specific customs that the Alethi kind of follow, but Navani doesn't care. She's going to talk to Dalinar if she wants to talk to Dalinar.
She really pushes those boundaries. I thought the idea that of the like woman's food was funny because it mentioned Dalinar had tried it once, and I thought that was really funny, like referring to when he was young and he like tried it and he was like, it wasn't that bad or something. And I thought it was actually really funny, just kind of the like the naivete, I guess, that is kind of portrayed there.
Yeah, those are fun, quirky little custom. Just I don't know, another thing that makes this world different, I guess, and another reminder that you're in a different world. And then there were other little clues about food as well that caught my eye, like the different colors of the alcoholic drinks that they had, and how Dalinar instructs his sons, "Oh, you're only drinking orange tonight," or whatever it is that he says.
Right.
That's the non-alcoholic drink or whatever that is. That was another fun one. And then there was a funny reference to chicken, right? How chicken is like a
It's a
rare
delicacy.
delicacy from
Yes.
a far off land or something like that.
Yep. So, everything from Earth that we kind of equate to nature is going to be the equivalent of Shinovar in the Way of Kings. So he's going to refer uh to chickens as those strange exotic shin creatures, those shin flying creatures is what he describes them as. And so Shinovar, which is, if you look at the map, it's all the way to the west of Roshar. It's on the very far west, and it's surrounded by mountains. And so Shinovar doesn't actually get high storms. They are on Roshar, and they don't get high storms. So the culture and the setting, I guess, of Shinovar is very similar to Earth, in that there are trees that don't look like underground or underwater seaweed, and there's grass and there's chickens and there's things that we're familiar with that Dalinar is not. So it's an interesting world building.
And then the only person we know that's from Shinovar is Zeth at this point.
Yes.
He's Shin.
Yep.
Okay, but no one else, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's interesting. I actually did not remember that Zeth was from Shinovar, or at least that he was the only one that we knew from Shinovar. That makes me very curious.
Makes me very curious too.
With this chapter, one of my favorite moments was at the very start. They're all like showing up to this feast, right? And there's the King's Wit, who's, I guess, greeting people, but he's kind of just roasting them at the door, just insulting them. And I thought that whole moment was really funny. He's talking to like ladies, like, "Wow, I can't believe you'd come here with your hair like that." I don't
how brave of you to show up like that.
Yeah, how brave of you to show up with your hair like that. And it was actually hilarious. We talked to him in the past about the wit, and he's really interesting to me because he seems, we compared him to a jester, and we talked about how he wasn't really a jester. He's a lot different than that, but he's just like really comical and likes to tease,
right,
and such. And I thought that was really funny of him, and it made me like him a little more just because it was funny. But I still don't have established like feelings towards the wit right now. I don't really like him, but it was a funny moment, I guess. But
he does have his comical side as shown in the beginning of this chapter, but he also is more invested than just that surface level comedy. He does genuinely warn Dalinar about rumors that's being passed around with him, that his reputation is genuinely at risk and being slandered at this feast, and Dalinar genuinely thanks him for warning him. And so he does have a genuine side to him. It's just his job is to sit there and insult people as they walk onto the island.
And even when he's giving Dalinar like valuable information, he's still like making fun of Dalinar and mocking him the whole time. And Dalinar's, getting irritated with him, but not enough to stop talking to him because he's getting some good information. And I did chuckle at this little wit section. It was pretty funny.
I love Wit. He's a very good character.
And like I said before, one of my two words was political, right? And I thought it was interesting. So I did that. I chose that word because of Navani and kind of the conversations that she has, and a lot of her pushing boundaries and such, knowing what she can and can't do. And then also, I think of that some with the wit, in that he's very knowledgeable and he kind of knows how to push the limits, push people's buttons almost,
Mhm.
and such. But
I
yeah,
think political was a really good word for this chapter actually, because we quickly get into the politics of it as soon as Dalinar sits down. And I mean, he's talking to Adolin about his plan, and then there's the whole bit where Navani comes over and starts talking politics, and then we find out that Sadeas has pulled off this brilliant political maneuver where he's kind of outmastered Dalinar in front of Elokar. So political is well chosen. Good word.
There's a phrase that Navani uses while Sadeas's announcement is happening. Sadeas has announced the High Prince of Information, which is an old Alethi custom that each High Prince would be sanctioned off a certain responsibility in the kingdom. One would be in charge of warfare, one would be in charge of trade, one would be in charge of investigating whatever. And this is the first time Elokar has announced something like this, and it is part of the old Alethi codes, which is why Dalinar was trying to push for him to be the High Prince of War so that he could actually get things done. But Elokar refuses him, and then the very next feast later, he announces Sadeas as the High Prince of Information. And halfway through this little announcement that Sadeas is making, Navani has a very specific phrase, and she says she kind of trusts Sadeas, and that kind of wraps the whole thing up in a very nice bow for this whole chapter. Is nobody completely trusts each other. Dalinar doesn't completely trust Navani. Navani is here, and Wit is definitely knows who she is, and Navani is talking to Dalinar and says she kind of trusts Sadeas. So everyone is willing to work together and be friendly, but nobody is willing to turn their back on the other person and completely trust them yet.
Typical aristocrats.
True. I thought it was funny with the whole I kind of trust Sadeas.
Yep.
And that it's I feel the same way almost. It's like I kind of trust Sadeas. Like we, even from like our perspective of kind of seeing what's going on, we know that Sadeas has been a good guy and that has honor, but he's kind of corrupt, and so it's pretty applicable to me too. I kind of trust Sadeas, but at the same time, I don't trust him.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess I can relate to Navani some here.
So far, we haven't been given any reason to not trust Sadeas, besides the fact that his moral code is more bent than Dalinar's. So other than that, he hasn't done anything deliberately against the crown or against Dalinar, except a couple of these backhanded insults or compliments towards Dalinar's behavior as of late. But that's the only thing.
It seems very alluded to that there are going to be problems with Sadeas throughout. He always seems like, offhand remarks, not approving of Dalinar, and really uppity in his approach with people. And he's also known for, like you said, with the moral code, having the man-powered run bridges. and such. So
But then on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Dalinar's visions telling him very specifically to trust Sadeas, which I want to believe the visions. I feel like it's something that's giving Dalinar important information. But yeah, at this point, we don't really have any reason besides that to trust Sadeas. So I'm very much in the I kind of trust Sadeas camp as well.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see where that goes because I'm sure that will be addressed in the future.
There's a conversation that Adolin and Dalinar have with each other at the feast, and it's kind of off to the side, so nobody else is there. Well, there are other people there, but nobody's listening in. And Adolin is confronting him, or trying to confront him, about his visions, the way of kings, that type of thing. And Dalinar's kind of brushing him off. But at the end of this conversation, it says, "I'm trying to decide," Adolin said, "which one has changed you most, the visions, the codes, or that book? If there's any difference between them." "The codes are separate from the other two," Dalinar said. They are a tradition of old Alethkar." "No, they're related, father. All three. They're tied together in you somehow." Dalinar thought on that for a moment. Could the lad have a point? So Adolin sees from an exterior perspective that Dalinar is tying these three together in his mind and trying to adhere to all three at once, of the book, the visions, and the codes. And Dalinar still thinks of them as separate instances, but Adolin sees them as all together, wrapped up in a bundle. They're all from the same source.
I think Dalinar doesn't realize how much each of those things is affecting him. I'm getting the impression that he's interested in the Way of Kings almost from a purely literary or philosophical interest, and then now he's realizing, oh man, this book and the philosophy of it is changing how I think, it's changing how I act, it's changing who I am, and it's kind of taking Adolin to point that out to him for Dalinar to realize that. And then in chapter 24 here in a little bit is when things really come to a head, when Adolin really just lets loose on him and says, hey man, you're letting everything fall apart because you're getting too wrapped up in this philosophy stuff.
Yeah. Adolin finally confronts him in chapter 24, and I have a hard time visualizing in my head the gallery of maps. I don't know if this is a secluded library somewhere, or if it's like an open chamber with other people present, like a common room area, because it's referred to later, and we'll get there in a little bit, that people spread the news around that Adolin and Dalinar are having a fight after this confrontation in the gallery of maps. But from the context, it doesn't seem like there's anybody else there. He met with Roion there, and I assume to be like a private, room in the gallery of maps. But then Adolin apologizes for when and where he confronted Dalinar. So I honestly don't know what the gallery of maps looks like, if it's a huge open dome room area, or if it's a secluded alcove somewhere in the palace. I don't know.
Yeah, my thought just reading it for the first time, I didn't put that much thought into it, to be honest, about what does the gallery of maps look like. But I had definitely assumed it was a more secluded, or at least that there was some private section in there for them to have their conversation, just because it seemed like a private conversation. So I guess I was just under the assumption that it was more secluded, not a super public area that they would be heard.
Right.
So going back a little bit to wrap up some of our thoughts from chapter 22, I think we probably should talk about Navani a little bit. She strikes me as a new character that's unlike characters we've seen before, except for possibly Yasna, which makes sense. But she comes in and she seems very in control, very stately, very much the monarch that Elokar isn't. I mean, Elokar's not a terrible monarch, but he doesn't quite fit the role. Navani seems like the one who she walks into the room and everyone pays attention or everyone notices.
Right.
And then on top of that, there's a word that I didn't really know that references her. She's described as an artifabrian. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I can guess that means she works at creating fabrials. Is that what that is? So she very much like the engineer kind of person.
They haven't explained it yet, but yes, basically you're pretty correct that she works with fabrials. That's what that means.
And then she brings up a bit of information for Dalinar. She talks about how the Vadens have invented half shards, she's calling them, where they have apparently this new technology that's not quite full shard plate. They don't have shard blades, I guess, but they have basically shields, I think she said, that can defend against a shard blade. So that was interesting that so far shard bearer technology seems very exclusive and you can't just go and build your own suit of shard plate. But now somebody's kind of unlocked the code a little bit. Is that what's going down here? It seemed like some big news, even though Dalinar didn't seem too shocked by it.
To me, it really sounded like, if I remember correctly, Dalinar was saying like, "I'll believe it when I see it." But I'm assuming that
Yeah.
attempted before, that people have been trying to make shard plate or some equivalent, and so I'd imagine that he'd heard of this before, and it never actually works out. It's always a rumor that, oh, we're building our own shard plate. Uh, that was what I got from that.
Yeah, both of you were spot on that it's definitely been rumored before that nobody knows how to make shard plate, nobody knows how to make shard blades, and Navani finally has reliable information that somebody has indeed invented something that blocks shard blades. So,
And Dalinar's just like, yeah, okay, I'll believe it whenever I see
skeptical for sure.
Yeah. But I am curious because, so with Navani, she's very much this matriarchal character, um, and I think it's gonna be interesting to see where it goes, especially in this kind of culture where, I mean, everything is so separate. Like you explained earlier, Trevor, how she couldn't approach Dalinar until after he'd finished eating and such, like things like that. Um, I feel like she would never let anything like that stop her from making a big impact and having these conversations. Um, and so I bet she's gonna do some crazy stuff. And she's Elokar's mother, correct?
Correct.
Am I okay? So I have we seen a conversation between the two of them, Elokar and Navani?
Nope, not yet.
I'd be
I
curious.
don't think so.
I'd be curious to see some more conversations between her and her family members.
The only interaction there that you've, like, it's sort of an interaction, is that Navani confides in Dalinar that Navani doesn't think he's a great monarch. That he's a good man, but he's not doing a good job with the throne. That's the only indication you've got so far.
Yeah, certainly. So kind of a big step down from the throne. I'm really curious to talk with y'all about the Kaladin chapters, or at least chapter 23 right now. So we have Kaladin and his buddies now, Teft and Numuhuku Makiaki Aino Lunamore, go out and they
Love that.
they're getting this, what is it, knobweed sap? Is that what it's called?
Yep. You want to spell that one real quick?
We'll say it. It can't be that bad,
It
right?
just starts with a K. That's the only weird thing.
K-N-O-B. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. knobweed sap. That's easy. Not even worth it. Yeah, so they go out and they start just finding all the knobweeds and sapping them as quick as they can, and end up with like a bottle of it, right? And Kaladin looks to sell that to, and he's kind of just having this big attempt with the small group of allies he has at the moment to try and either at least get some antiseptic for himself, and then also maybe make some money and kind of investing into the situation that he's in. And I think that was a really interesting chapter, and it really shows the hard work that Kaladin is putting in. And also, we get some more friendships kind of built up along the way.
The knob the chapter where they go out and gather all the knobweed sap is really interesting because Rock can see Syl and Syl can find the knobweed and Teft can't. So Teft is kind of confused on why Rock is so much better at finding all this knobweed, and they don't bother explaining it to him. Kaladin or Rock don't bother explaining it to him, and he's just a little. I just imagine him just being like a little frustrated at the competition of it. He's just like, how is he so much better at this than me? Like,
I'm starting to like Rock more and more. There's a couple different examples in this chapter of he's not quite what he seems at first. He's this big, hulking, horn eater that's bigger than everyone else and huge muscles and whatnot. But then he's actually really stealthy. We learn later in the chapter, and he's actually very delicate and gentle with his big hands when they're getting the sap out of the weeds. And I just think that's kind of fun that Rock's not what he seems like at first, and I'm starting to like him quite a bit.
right? Yeah, he successfully sneaks up on Teft, and he's very
Yeah.
deliberate with the verb they use is milking the knobweed sap. He's very deliberate in that. And Syl declares halfway through the chapter that she likes him very much, and Kaladin's like, "Oh yeah, why is that?" And she's like, "He's very polite." And then Syl said, "He's too polite. I can't spend too much time with him because he's too polite." And yeah, there's a nice Syl moment tied in there with Rock.
That's another one of my favorite things is these little blurbs from Sylphrena where she's just so candid and she doesn't have an eloquent way of saying things, but she's like, I like him very much. She's like, but I don't like him too much because he's just too, she can't quite put her finger on it almost.
Right.
And I think it's really funny. I love that.
Syl quotes are always good. I like that we also in this chapter got to learn some more about culture and background, and that was this time of the horn eaters, which I was super curious about. And we learned from little bits and pieces that Rock drops along the way, or sorry, Numu Huku, whatever his name is, drops along the way.
A little more, yeah.
That one. He mentions a couple things, and we learn a little bit about the horn eaters. We learn that they do come from the mountains. They come from the horn eater peaks, which was something I was kind of guessing at before. And then Kaladin makes a mention of he thinks that Rock reveres Syl so much because perhaps horn eaters worship Spren. It seems like that's maybe not a confirmed thing at this point, but Kaladin just kind of is assuming that or guessing that, which is interesting. And then we also learn why they're called horn eaters. They're called horn eaters because they eat stuff like shells and horns and rocks or whatever other stuff. They just have really tough teeth, I guess.
So
they just kind of throw it all in the stew.
Right. If you think about the setting of Roshar, everything's either got a carapace or a shell. And so when they're cooking their food, they just toss it in the stew, let it boil a little bit, and the shell's softened a little bit, so just eat it with the shell on. That's what they do. So
they just eat their food with the crust on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of taking the crust off, they say.
And those people that don't peel oranges before they eat them, they just, chomp right into them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think
No
people like that
thanks.
actually exist.
Oh, they
but
do.
Good, good
I
analogy.
promise.
Okay.
Just you, Trevor. Just you.
Uh-oh.
But then we learn
Cut.
also how Rock became a Bridgman, which I thought was a hilarious story. First off, because it's just so kind of out there and then the punchline is pretty good. We learn that he came down from the mountains with his clan, basically, is kind of how I'm interpreting that, where he's come down following this leader, which we learn later is like a cousin of his, and their leader has come down in order to challenge a shard bearer to try and win a shard to become the first Horn Eater shard bearer. And apparently he comes down and challenges Sadius and loses, of course, because Sadius has shard plate and this Horn Eater guy doesn't. But then Rock becomes a servant in Sadius's house, specifically the chef, because apparently Rock is a chef. That's his occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets kicked down to the Bridgman level when he decides to put some chul dung into Sadius's soup.
Yep.
That was hilarious, and I think Teft thought it was hilarious too.
Teft also thought it was hilarious, to the point where Kaladin was concerned that he was about to roll into the chasm from laughing so hard.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, Rock is so funny because he's willing to go to the bridge cruise over something so petty. He doesn't like.
Yeah.
He just wants to put chul dung in his soup because he just felt like it.
I didn't think it was going to taste that strong.
Yeah. So Kaladin, before we move on from this chapter, Kaladin kind of has a discussion with himself while he's watching the Bridgman gather these stones. Sild's kind of in the area, but Kaladin thinks to himself, as they already have the knobweed sap, and they're headed down to the chasm to milk them. And this is where this excerpt is from. They approached the place where Kaladin had nearly killed himself. What a difference a few days could make. He felt like a different person, a strange hybrid of the man he had once been, the slave he'd become, and the pitiful wretch he still had to fight off. He remembered standing on the edge of the chasm, looking down. That darkness still terrified him. If I fail to save the Bridgman, that wretch will take control again. This time, he'll get his way. So, this is Kaladin's depression again in a different light of there are multiple people inside of him, and he's still not free of it. He's still fighting, even though he seems to be doing better these last couple days. He knows that if somehow he fails in doing this seemingly impossible task, that he will fall back in and become the wretch, as he describes it, this person who has no hope and just lives as an animal, basically. There's a quote from a Brandon Sanderson interview that I would like to read for the two of you about Kaladin. And he was asked how he goes about the topic of mental health, and he also has a character in one of his other books, I won't spoil anything, who's on the spectrum of autistic, and the question was asked, how do you address these topics in such an eloquent way, and this is Brandon. This is part of the quote. The other half of the quote is a spoiler, so I'm not going to read that. But Brandon Sanderson said this about Kaladin. I worked very hard to make it so that Kaladin is not defined by his depression. Kaladin is a protagonist who has depression, but depression is not Kaladin's main challenge. So Kaladin has this problem of winning over the Bridgman and saving these Bridgmen. That's what he's decided to do, all while trying to battle his depression. So if he fails in doing A, B will take over. So, and he's not only fighting B, he's primarily fighting A. So I just wanted to highlight Brandon Sanderson's thoughts of Kaladin, and why he wrote him the way he wrote him.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. I really like that extra bit of info there directly from the author himself. I really appreciate this aspect of Kaladin's character. It's such a subtle but relatable way that readers can connect with Kaladin and really feel that he's struggling to overcome the scenarios that are around him, but at the same time battling with this depression, this inner struggle that he's having. So like the inner struggle and the outer struggle as well, which even if it's not depression, I think all of us relate to that, where we're battling our own inner selves, whether it's just doubt or fear or whatever that is, while at the same time trying to live our lives and overcome our exterior battles. It's a really well written character, so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe The Way of Kings to someone as, yeah, it's a book about a guy who has depression. I would describe it as
Right.
a book in a fantasy world, and there's characters just trying to make their way in this strange world, and one of them happens to have depression. So
Yeah, like you said, he does it so eloquently in that, yeah, like you're introduced to the characters, and that's not on the forefront. I think that's kind of an important thing because reading this, it makes it really exciting to like learn about these characters, but then you also start to feel for them more as you learn a more internal struggle that they have kind of behind the scenes. And so, yeah, that is very well executed here.
Elliot, you have on the outline part of Kaladin and Rock and Tef's conversation about Kaladin's past, and you said he doesn't trust Lighteyes. You want to expound upon this?
I certainly do. So we've had now numerous hints, and we get more now that Kaladin really has a chip on his shoulder against the Lighteyes. Anytime anyone mentions Lighteyes, he responds really almost violently sometimes. The quote in this chapter, he just refers to them as arrogant, vengeful, greedy, corrupt to the core, and Rock just kind of gives him a funny look, like, "Are you okay, man?"
Yeah.
And this has kind of formed a theory in my mind about Kaladin's past. We know so far that Kaladin was a slave or made a slave because he killed someone, and there's been a couple references to that. There's even a little bit later in the discussion in the same chapter where Rock is saying, "You killed a man and they made you a slave for that?" And Kaladin specifically says, "It wasn't murder. In fact, I was thanked for it by someone very important." That really had me scratching my head, like, what happened? And I might be going out on a limb on this one, but I thought back to the flashback chapter where Laurel, was that the girl's name? She really encouraged Kaladin to go become a soldier so that he could kill a Lighteyes, or no, not kill a shard bearer and get a shard and become a Lighteyes. I wonder if Kaladin is so bitter against Lighteyes because maybe he actually succeeded in that, but then somehow got denied the shard blade that he should have won. I might be stretching for this, but I can't think of anything else that would give him such a bitter outlook at all Lighteyes. I don't know. I'm gonna write this one down. This is my new Kaladin theory.
So here's something I want to highlight for you that might reinforce or discourage you. Maybe depends on how you interpret this on your prediction. Is that when we get
Okay.
Flashback chapters for Kaladin, he does not have this visceral gut reaction to Lighteyes. Laurel herself is a Lighteyes, and he's friends with her. And it's
Yep.
hinted at that maybe she's a potential love interest of Kaladin's in the future. And when Rashon comes in chapter 25, he's excited to go see the new Lighteyes of Hearthstone. He goes, and the entire family shows up, and they're very excited to see Rishon show up for his first speech. It doesn't end up being that much of a speech, but they were excited originally.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know if that reinforces your theory of Kaladin trying to go win a shard blade, but perhaps.
I think it's clear in my mind that he's been betrayed, or he feels like he's been backstabbed by a Lighteyes at some point. That has to be the case. I think it's just a matter for me of what was it that happened. Was it tied to trying to win a shard blade, or is it something more like a love interest that denied him, or something like that? That I'm not sure, but I really want to lean on the side of epic, so I'm going for, he tried to win a shard blade and become a shard bearer, but he was somehow denied it by a Lighteyes backstabbing him.
Thoughts, Paul?
That's a very interesting theory. I was thinking about that. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I wasn't sure why there was a big dislike for Lighteyes, other than we just kind of see a repetitive character of Lighteyes almost being pompous, or
Yeah.
kind of like I said when we were talking earlier, like political kind of scheming almost, and it's just a lot of things that Kaladin doesn't really have a tolerance for and does not look up to at all. So that was my assumption, was simply that he didn't like Lighteyes in a generic, they're stuck up kind of way. But if there's some kind of big betrayal or big moment there, that would make a lot of sense too, about why he would really have this bitterness for them.
The when we get in this Kaladin flashback chapter 25, he expresses the desire to fit in. All he wants to do is speak like the other villagers, like slur his words like they do, and his mother corrects him as to, no, you're going to speak proper, because what do you think of Mrs. What's her face? I don't remember her name. When she speaks like that, and Kaladin's like, I think she's naive and is like doesn't have proper manners, and Kaladin's mother's like, well, then let's not talk like that, shall we? And he's like, maybe, well, okay, fine. And then also he still wants to be a soldier as opposed to a surgeon, because a surgeon, he would be ostracizing himself from everyone else, like his father is. They think he doesn't fit in, certainly, but it even goes further than that, where the other villagers are suspicious of him stealing the spheres from Laurel's father, and they think he does unnatural things by fixing people's broken bones and surgery and that type of thing. His mother explains it to him as, if you pray to the Almighty and you don't get better, that's because that's the Almighty, and that's fine. But if you go to Liren and you don't get better, that's then Liren's fault. That Liren is then outcast because he didn't save whoever in their village. And Kaladin doesn't want that for himself. He wants to fit in, like maybe in the army or maybe somewhere else. He doesn't know.
It's true. It was a very difficult thing to talk about with his father Liren, in that you might get a little bit of praise and approval for doing your work correctly, but you make one mistake and it's like a big fuss, and a lot of problems come because of that, and such. So
Yeah, makes sense that he would want to get away from that in his life. He sees how his father's a little prejudiced against the other people of the town, and he doesn't want to be that, which I can understand that.
so a big thing. So still talking about the title of our podcast, we've learned a little bit about Noadon over the chapters we've read. We knew that he was right. Our prediction that he was an important person, right? Um, we found out that he was an author of the Way of Kings, or wrote that, and we found out from this chapter that he was king of Alethkar at some point, which I thought was really cool. We now know at least what he did. At least what his, I guess, occupation was. He was royalty. He was the king. And so I guess I would say our prediction was totally correct.
Well,
Eliot's was, I believe, didn't he?
Elliot's prediction.
Eliot's was, yeah, was spot on.
Elliot's original prediction was knowledge spread. I just want to keep referring to this one because this is
It's still possible.
my
We don't. That hasn't been answered.
it in theory
True.
could be possible, I suppose. I mean, Syl has more personification than most Spren, and so maybe there's some Spren in the past that have more personification than normal, but
True.
maybe all these people are spread. I mean, we don't know yet, right? I mean,
People
that-
spread.
I'm hanging on to it. It still could be true, but
maybe
no, my revised prediction, which I got a lot of hints and clues before then, was on, and I was excited to see that Noadon was indeed a king and the king of Alethkar, which seems rather significant. And then also I think we got a little bit of time to place him in as well. It was a reference to him being a king of Alethkar in the days of the heralds. So I think we know that he not only was a king, he was a king of Alethkar, and he was a king of Alethkar a long, 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 long time ago. So we're learning a lot more, I think.
if this
We're getting closer.
if this helps you with the timeline at all, the Radiance or the Knights Radiant, or however you want to, depending on who you talk to, wrote their codes via the Way of Kings, and even the Radiants are far myths in the past. So that tells you how old Noadon is.
Makes sense.
So he's pretty old. I see.
Yep.
This is on the topic of mentioning Spren again. This is kind of backtracking slightly. You talked about how, I mean, Noadon could be a knowledge Spren, right? And earlier we talked about on our outline we have about Brock and how the Horn Eaters might worship Spren. That was a question.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I saw that, I was like, whenever I read that on the outline, I was like, where did we see worship Spren? I couldn't like worship Spren. I was trying to think of like when did they see worship Spren? Like, that's kind of unrelated. I'm sorry. I just thought that was funny.
There's spread for everything, so
Yeah,
I totally get that.
They I don't know.
I mean,
something's going on. And
we have seen Glory Spren
Worship
multiple
Spren.
times, so
true.
Worship Spren may not be that far fetched.
No Spren is too far fetched in universe.
Just put spread next to whatever word you want, and
Exactly.
yeah, they totally exist.
Yes.
I mean, we theorized previously that there were computer Spren and spin Spren and a whole bunch of different things. So
exactly. So coming up next, we're going to talk about some in chapter 25. We meet Kaladin's mother Spren, and well, we learn a little bit about that past, and it's really interesting. I was curious to hear what y'all thought more about it.
about his mother.
Yes.
I did enjoy meeting Kaladin's mother. Her name was Hasina, right? Hasina, is that how you say?
Yep.
And she seemed a little more educated, maybe than like a commoner. She just seemed to want her son to achieve and be better than maybe the situation he was in, which I relate to as a new parent for sure.
It was good to see that the bond between her and Kaladin a little bit. Like you mentioned earlier, Trevor like correcting his speech and things like that. She really wanted the best for him, and also kind of had to whip him in shape a little bit because it wasn't Kaladin was being kind of apathetic about their living situation and stuff, and she was like, "No, we're actually like kind of high up, or at least in proximity to
Yeah.
Right.
the people he's envious of and stuff." And she was kind of like, "Be grateful," almost.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it was a good, uh, a motherly moment with her young child. I thought it was a really good description, and I'm really glad we kind of have this puzzle piece fitted in here now with Kaladin's family and kind of learning more about his past.
Yep. She had an interesting comment about work, and Kaladin's father does not charge for his surgeries because he doesn't believe you should charge for medical care, and which then makes Kaladin's mother need to work to support the family. And Kaladin asks her about that. Why doesn't Liren charge for his services so that you wouldn't have to work? And she says, "Well, I like working, so why would we do that? Because I would work anyway, even if we didn't need me to, I still would want to." So she definitely has a very laborer's mindset of I'm content supporting my family, and that work in itself is self-fulfilling.
Hardworking was one of your words, right, Paul? That
Yes, sir.
that tied it all together nicely.
Yes, sir.
Any
Yeah, I was
closing
really hit the nail on the head there.
any closing thoughts for this episode?
Honestly, I think everything was covered. I don't have anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, same. As always, excited to read more. I really want to know. I guess I'll say one thing. I want to know where Dalinar and Navani's relationship is going, because there's a bit of tension there. I'm guessing we're gonna get more of that.
Okay. All right. We shall reconvene. Thank you for joining me, Elliot and Paul.
Of course.
Farewell.